Um, Also, just to remind med students, there should be a Google poll link dropped in the chat, so fill that out at the end of the session if you want Oucha hours. Um, but if our speakers are ready, then we can go ahead and get started. You guys good to go?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm feeling a little nervous that you've already invited people to poll us on how we did before we even begun. So,
Oh, no, it's not
that just sort
polling.
of sets that bar right at the top, Kyle. But here we go.
Oh, no,
Oh.
they're not gonna poll you guys. It's just polling
Just
that they
kidding.
attended the conference.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I can vouch for all of you. I see at least your names, the majority of you. So, super, super thankful to be here. There are about half of you whose faces I can see and half of you are names only, but I think if I understand the trajectory of your day correctly, you guys you've covered some ground, right? You've gone everywhere from sort of history to redlining to poverty and how's that sitting? Those of you whose camera I can see, are you feeling totally overwhelmed? And how do we even begin to make a difference in these kinds of, yeah, thank you. I get a shaky hand, another shaky hand.
It's good to people who are doing the work too. It's kind of inspiring in that regard.
Do what?
It's kind of inspiring to hear from a bunch of people who are interested in doing this work. So, in a lot of ways, I feel thumbs up.
Yeah, totally. Look at this early participation. You guys are like, this is dream scenario. If you're going to talk at a black screen, this is what you want to see right here. So we're super glad you're here. So I'm Caylee Dodson. I'm one of the directors of RestoreOKC. Julie's our director of operations here. We are not sisters. Sometimes this question comes up, but I would claim her. She probably wouldn't claim me. I would claim her. So we're very, very, very honored to join this. I know that you guys have covered a lot of sort of heavy lifting material over the course of the day. So our hope and our heart really is to kind of give you a little bit of an overarching sense of RestoreOKC and who we are, in the hopes that as your OU students or just the trajectory of your careers, if you stay here in the city, that we would hope to give you maybe some practical handlebars in terms of how would we begin to actually maybe engage in taking whatever resources we talk a lot in terms of whatever privilege that we may have and using it for the privilege of another. So, we're going to kind of get into, there's lots of different opportunities and ways to engage. But before we do, I kind of want to just set the tone a little bit with the story, because I think it's a little bit helpful to understand the why before we kind of jump into the what and all the ways that you guys can engage with us. So since you're all in the medical sphere, as I was sort of thinking about what would I want to share, what would I hope, that you kind of take away in terms of an image or a story that maybe sticks with you, that has so much shaped me. And then as we move back to join another Northeast servant, brother, deep friend and brother of mine now, Ernest, to start RestoreOKC, just kind of the things that were foundational for us in terms of philosophy. We'd say philosophy of ministry, but just our why, philosophy of why we do what we do. So I am born and raised Northwest Oklahoma City. I'm sure you guys are from all over the place, but it's 20 minutes from where I now live. So we live in the community that we serve. We moved into Northeast Oklahoma City when we moved back, but we spent about 10 years in inner city St. Louis. I don't know how many of you have a context for St. Louis. It is a 250 plus year old city. So we like to joke, when we say we lived in inner city St. Louis, that we don't have an inner city that's quite like it yet, because we're a 100-year-old city. We actually are really hopeful about that as we sort of recognize the disparities that exist in a 100-year-old city, we actually are able to kind of chart a different course now than experience a lot of what we experienced there, which was 250 years worth of injustice, creating systems that are much, much harder to turn around. So I hope that's hopeful, but early in. So we're grad students. You guys know something of how this goes. So not only did we already live in an area that was predominantly low income, about 6 months into our time as grad students, I took a job working with a asset-based community development ministry called Restore St. Louis. So you're going to connect the dots that really, as it relates to our naming, we're just not creative. That's how we landed with RestoreOKC as our name. It's okay. You can laugh at that. But I was incredibly blessed to be able to start working with women who were literally, there was a huge red light district 2 blocks from our front door. So we moved into the heart of the hood there. I mean, this was a community that we were serving in, and it mattered to us to be a part of it, recognizing there's so much we don't know. And as we start talking about these things at the macro level, my hope is we can kind of move into the micro level of how much relationship has to drive curiosity and humility and engaging in relationship, or else we kind of tend to throw band-aids at these things without really understanding the needs of the community on the ground. But for us, that came out of, we would not have known that 10 years ago. And early in, I think one of the kindest things that ever happened to me, though landing at the ER is never a kind thing for anybody, is that I lived in a new inner city St. Louis community and had a weird autoimmune funky flare up, and I landed in the closest hospital to me, which if you were probably a St. Louis native, you knew better to drive the extra 10 minutes, right, and get to the ER that had real walls between the beds and not the one with the sheet. But I didn't. I'm not a native. So I land at our closest ER, and I had an experience that deeply shaped me. And I think it matters for you guys as healthcare practitioners, where I'm laying in my little hospital bed, and the doctor comes in, I've got a sheet between my neighbor and I. So imagine a sheet between Julie and I here. And I'm just hearing her in obvious pain. I don't know about you guys, but when I go to the ER, I'm selfish all the time. I'm particularly selfish when I'm in pain. So I'm not trying to get involved in whatever's going on that side of the curtain. That's the doctor's job, right? That's what you guys do. But it became just overwhelmingly obvious that she needed help. And I hadn't heard anybody coming and going. So against my better judgment, I just said, ma'am, is there anything I can do to help? And she asked me a very simple question. She said, yes, would you please press your button? And I was kind of I'm a little bit intrigued by this question, right? You've probably got a button too. Why doesn't it work? This is sort of the ignorance, and I don't say that in a bad way. We're all ignorant of contexts that aren't our own. And she said, yes, I do have a button, but would you just press yours? And I now know what she was saying is nobody's coming when I press my button. So I pressed my button, and sure enough, within a minute, I've got a couple nurses in my room, and I said, my neighbor here needs some help. Curtain's still closed at this point. I have not met or seen this woman. And the nurses kind of scoff and say, well, if she really needed help, she should have come much sooner. So there's this movement towards actually blaming her for why and I was shocked. I was like, well, hold on, what in the world is going on? But we kind of resolve this, and the doctor goes next door and begins to tell her more or less she's going into surgery. Best case scenario, colostomy bag for the rest of her life. Worst case scenario, she's not coming out of this surgery. So go ahead and start calling her loved ones. Well, she's got a government issue flip phone, right? That's new. And if you've ever been and worked in low-income communities, this is a very common phenomenon, and it's a new flip phone. People cycle phones all the time. So she's calling her friends and loved one with numbers she remembers, just by her own memory. And they don't recognize this number because it's a new number. And so nobody is picking up. And she begins to just leave all of these voicemails. And I thought, what a crazy moment for this. So I, again, against better judgment, would it be okay if I remove my curtain and just sit with you until the doctor comes? And she let me. And she began to share just sort of her own history of this moment and her lack of ability to get help for chronic health conditions and the trauma in which she'd grown up. And it started to hit me that these problems compound. But in those moments where the crisis is sort of the most acute, what matters most is our ability to engage with one another in relationship. And I think the invitation there for us is my button worked. So this foundationally set for us a framework of recognizing, my gosh, when it comes to issues that are, and you've heard about it all day, that are so deeply rooted in society and in structures and in systems, when we're thinking about injustice and social determinants of health and how do we actually get to health equity and what does it mean to have food access, when we start thinking about how do we fix those things that have been so broken from the foundational point of our country, something shifted in me that day to understand, okay, actually, when we think about how we engage with one another, it has to be from this place of relationship. Relationship has to drive, because there are leaders and spaces and contexts and communities that we don't understand, but we need to engage, right? My button works. There was a way in which I could serve my neighbor that day that she helped walk me through. So I think that matters for us as we sort of move into who in the world is RestoreOKC and why do we do what we do. It was about 9 years from that point forward that Michael Brown shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri, and we were really close to that. And at the same time in this city, the Daniel Holtzclaw trials were happening. How many of you guys remember what that is? Some nodding heads, some blank stares. You may just be frozen, but I'm going to assume not everybody knows and say this is the officer who is indicted. I 90 something counts of sexual abuse, almost all against women in my community. And it prompted a lot of leaders in our city to go, and sadly, for a lot of the white community, I think the question genuinely sometimes still is, do we have a race problem? Because we haven't had to know. So there's somewhere between the dichotomy of do we have a problem to how do we begin to address this problem, prompted some leaders to come and visit what we were a part of, which was a 35-year reconciliation-based community development organization, and really is how we landed back here. So seeing the sort of the fruit of a 35-year plus relationally centered asset-based community development organization prompted those leaders to ask my husband and I, would you guys return? Which is really how we began to look at, okay, if we were going to go back into the city that we know, but serve in communities that when we left here 10 years ago, we certainly did not know well. We've got 10 years under our belt of really being deeply incarnational learners, humbly listening, and we've changed in a significant way. But what does it look like to come back into those spaces with that same humility and actually figure out where is this needed in a context that is familiar but not? So can we screen share? Okay, hold on one second. We're going to show you a little bit of, we'll see if our technology holds up here. You guys just look at us crazy if it doesn't come through. Everybody see that? Good, okay. Faithful thumbs up, I appreciate you. So when we started looking at what does this look like? What does this look like? And in every city, and so no matter where you land, as you guys graduate, go on throughout your careers, because the foundational point of our country is the same. It's sad, but in almost every city, modern highway movement, redlining practices have carved out, and it was almost shocking to us when we looked at our own city through the lens of what we knew about St. Louis and found almost identical donut, right? It's this poverty ring of kind of concentric circles, and it drove hugely how we thought about, okay, what community do we engage? Part of that was leaders like Ernest and others who were on the ground saying, hey, would you please come? We need other folks in our community who we can really link arms with and walk shoulder to shoulder in these things, because it is too big for any, one set of one group of people to tackle. It does have to be a united effort. So there was the invitation. We also began looking at it. So we put this on the screen because I want you guys to kind of see your own city. Not all of you are from here, but this little dark purple or dark blue area, depending on which of these you look at, is where we live and serve. So we are at, for those of you familiar, Northeast 23rd and Martin Luther King intersection is our closest intersection. And if you look at I-235, right, this is the major highway, and Nikki just talked about it. And actually, if you look at our logo, you see the hands meeting at the Capitol. And we wanted that to be intentional because of this. When you meet at that Capitol, you cross that 235 line is where you see that 18-year life discrepancy difference for our city. It's also where you see this donut of poverty. So the purple map is just the same reflection, same screenshot. The left is broken down by race. The right is broken down by income. So it's obviously not always as simple as saying this is a black-white ministry or this is a poor. We have created fabric, history, and structures and systems, and injustice has led to that. This is a pretty common theme in every major city, and this is what ours looks like. So we're hopeful that Restore OKC, driven by that relational core, is giving really great options for folks to engage in relationship and see this shift here in our city. So I'm going to let Julie take it from there. And then hopefully we'll get some time for questions, since that's a lot of information.
Yeah, so just quickly a little bit about me. I started working here at Restore about 3 years ago, got involved about 4 years ago. So within the first year of Restore being around, I got to jump in a volunteer basis. So I've gotten to see a lot of it grow, and it's real exciting. So I'm gonna try to give you guys in a short amount of time a little high view of what we have going on. And then, like Caylee said, we'll hopefully have some time for all of your questions. So as Caylee mentioned, we are really focused on development. There are obviously high needs for relief and emergency and those types of things. And there are some amazing organizations in Oklahoma City that are doing that work and are really good at that work. So as best we're able, we always try to partner with relief organizations, and we try to be focused really in the development piece. We'll get into a little bit. We do crossover in that space, especially during times of COVID, a pandemic, right? If you're in a community that was already in crisis in a lot of ways, a global crisis like that has even greater impacts on our community here. So when we think about what makes a flourishing individual, flourishing family, flourishing community, there are a lot of pieces to that, right? And so if resources are taken out of one of those areas or multiple of those areas, you know, that's kind of what puts low-income communities in crisis oftentimes. So we kind of work in 4 different areas. You know, you need shelter, access to affordable, safe housing, access to education that opens up opportunity in the future, jobs that pay a living wage, that you have economic opportunity for your family, and then food access. So not only having stores in your community, but affordable and healthy food being available to you. So we have different program arms in each of these areas. I could kind of pick any one of these to start with because it is a cycle that we see. So I'm just going to start with kind of where we started when Restore first started in 2016. So that's in that education piece. So when Caylee and her husband moved here, I'm going to share your story from my perspective. So when they moved here, as she mentioned, we're relational based, community based. Our neighbors and community here know what they want to see in their community. They know what they need. And so those voices need to be amplified and heard. And so they went to the biggest kind of community center over here, which is Ralph Ellison Library, right on that intersection. She mentioned MLK and 23rd, and just went there to meet neighbors. And that summer, child subsidies were cut. And so parents that are working multiple jobs all across the city now are left with, you know, what do we do? Do we put food on the table or stay home with our kids? And so they found the safest place they could for their kids that summer. And that's where they met a bunch of kiddos and families throughout the course of that summer, helped provide lunches, childcare, tutoring, just really got to know those families. And a lot of those kids were at our local elementary school, Thelma Parks Elementary. And so when they came back in the fall, went to the school and really saw the need there. So the school had failing on all academic levels, very high teacher turnover, and just a lack of resource for those families. And again, it's a cycle, right? So parents are working multiple jobs just to provide for their families.
Do you want to say how many? So our average mom that first summer worked 3. So we had a high single parent household percentage of our average mom that summer. So we were feeding 125 kids breakfast and lunch Monday through Saturday out of the library. And then we followed them back to school. Average mom worked 3 part-time jobs for just under $16,000 a year, to give that some context.
Yeah. So, and then when you think about that, you know, that leaves parents with very little time to be at their kids' school, to be doing pieces at home for education. It's a cycle, right? So just seeing the need in a low-income school where over 80–90% of those families are in that low-income category. There's not much buffer there for resources. So we came in and said, all right, whatever teachers, administration, families, whatever you all need, we want to just plug in, come alongside, and treat it like it's, you know, our kids' school. We want to give all the support there. And so that today looks like we call them classroom care teams, and it's groups of 5 to 6 volunteers for every teacher at our 3 partner elementary schools. And those groups of volunteers are essentially the teachers for the year. So whatever they need, whether it's tutoring, uniform, supplies, events, whatever those school needs, that's where we really focus. And one of the biggest indicators was seeing, was it a 90% teacher turnover
There's a
rate?
90+ percentile turnover rate of staff from year to year at that school. So 9 out of 10 teachers do not return. And actually my godson and Ernest's sons were at that school, are students at that school. Saw 4 teachers in the course of his year. And this was pretty average for the school. So crazy turnover rates.
Yeah, so that, you know, leaves those kids with a lack of stability in their teachers. For the teachers themselves, a significant portion of them were emergency certified. So some limited training in just teaching, which is a hard job already. And then some of the special trauma interventions and those types of things that our schools need, that also wasn't there. So that's the big piece on education is really just loving our schools and supporting them well. The second area that came about was under housing. And so in meeting neighbors and a lot of seniors learning, you know, even as homeowners, they had a lot of repairs that they were not able to afford themselves, making their homes not safe, leaking roofs, plumbing, you know, all sorts of issues there. And the seniors were not able to access traditional funding support for that. A lot of organizations that particularly help in housing receive certain state and federal funding that requires certain requirements in your titling, and due to history in our community, a lot of seniors don't have free and clear titles to access that funding. And so we started repairing seniors' homes.
Yeah, so fair, I don't know how many of you guys, or if it's been mentioned today, the Fair Housing Act of 1968. So, you know, we have a neighbor whose home we repaired, who shared with her volunteer teams, which this is what we mean when we say relationship drives everything we do, over the course of getting that roof repaired, shared that she remembers when it became legal for Black families to move north of Northeast 10th Street, and her dad moving their family up here to Northeast 27th, where we currently sit, or where her house currently sits, and how she was just terrified every day that she was going to be shot for being north of Northeast 10th Street. So, you know, this housing, and really the history is just still so close in our state. So that sort of home repair piece has been huge for us, because the Black community, because of that historic Fair Housing Act, anything that takes state or federal funding usually can't touch them because of title issues that were wonky, in particular with loans that were issued, that were required, that the banks didn't want to make.
Yeah, so that has been a massive need and a great place to step in, because like Caylee said, you know, the relationships we get to build with these seniors and hearing their stories is a bigger blessing to us than probably anything we help them out with. Then the second piece in that housing is access to safe and affordable housing. So for people that are renting homes, you know, we hear stories of how much they're paying for rent for a home that has issues with mold or electricity, lots of things there. And so this is a area we really want to scale in, is having affordable housing in our community, especially, you know, as we think about COVID impacts. As soon as CARES Act funding runs out for back rent, and some of those protections for renters are lifted, you know, it's fairly predictable to know the numbers of evictions and things that we'll start to see. So that's a huge piece that we're looking to scale this year. And then third area, the economic opportunities, just jobs in our community. And this was a big one that came to light as we were getting to know families and hearing from their parents, single moms, as Caylee said, working 3 jobs across the city. And just that real need for a stable job, livable wage that lets you be home at night with your kids and your family. And so we met a mom who had a lot of experience in professional cleaning, and she shared her story with us, and she didn't want just a solution for herself. She wanted something that could be a solution for many other women and moms in our community. And so alongside her, we started what is now Wellspring Cleaning Company. And we currently have 25 moms, mostly single moms, who work for that company. It's not just a business. We do a job training portion that has traditional job training skills, soft skills, but also focuses on the whole person. So again, as a relational organization, if you've got a job, that's wonderful, but there, are all these other pieces of who you are that we care about and want to see restored as well. So there are a few more businesses that are coming under Restore Jobs, and I'll chat about those in a minute that we're really excited about. But that 4th area and kind of the last piece to come alongside, food access was always clearly a need when our neighbors were talking to us and, driving around. And so, but we didn't quite have what was going to happen there. And kind of a funny story of getting a donated commercial greenhouse. And we were at the time housed in the upstairs portion of a church in the community. We didn't have any land anywhere to put this greenhouse, but Caylee said yes. Anyways, which landed us where we are today.
Who doesn't want a greenhouse?
Northeast 23rd and near MLK in the community there. We have 5 acres. So the idea then, once we had the greenhouse and we're talking to neighbors and building this out, was okay, there's a need for access to fresh food. Let's grow it here. And so greenhouse got built. It has an aquaponic system in there, vertical towers. We could probably have a whole conversation on those. It's pretty neat, but
it's all powered by goldfish, 2,000
Yes.
goldfish. That's the cool thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
real exciting. So that is growing. Our front acreage is free community garden food for neighbors, and then our back acreage is production to actually sell the food to our community. And then the second piece of the farms, real exciting piece of it, the first thing the farms did when it became a program arm here was build a school garden at our 3 elementary schools for each classroom. So the kids are growing their food at school. It gives a great science lesson for the teachers, and in building those relationships with those kids and those families, thinking through, we want to continue this relationship through middle school and high school, seeing higher high school dropout rates. We want to walk alongside these kids through graduation. And so that started our farm internship program. So it's a paid internship for middle school and high school students in our community. They work on the farm in the greenhouse, do education, field trip, learning, awesome stuff. We have 12 interns right now. They're just amazing kids who love their community. They're the next generation, next leader. We want to see them come back and invest in their community after college, vocational school, whatever's next for them. One of our interns this fall said his dream was to come back and take our director of Restore Farms job. And that's what we hope to see as well.
One of them's swinging for my seat, and I'm all about it.
Yes.
So it would be awesome to see that happen. And there's some really fun partnerships there actually happening with OU, OSU. I gotta be honest, it's my alma mater, and Langston University. So there's not only some incredible food access points, but these kids' dream really early became, how do we go seed to shelf? How do we see our community actually leading the change with the assets our community has in spades, land, to create healthy food, so we're not as vulnerable in the next moment like COVID-19, so we don't have to have and see a community become dependent on emergency food distributions when the last grocery store closes with no warning to our community. So it's pretty beautiful to watch them really leading the way in that. And we sit on at some point, you guys are all welcome to come visit. We're on a 5-acre urban farm. That's where our offices are, smack in the middle of our neighborhood. So it's a very strange little place where all this is occurring, and it's going to be fun to see that tied into the larger grocery stores. I think we're going next.
Yeah. So Caylee hit on that. Food access in summer of 2019. The last large scale grocery store closed down in Northeast Oklahoma City with, so that, leaves our neighbors who transportation is often a challenge as well, with not too many opportunities for access to affordable, healthy groceries. And so we kind of asked our neighbors, what do you guys want to see happen? What resources can be brought in? What do we want to do here? Do we want a food pantry? What do we want? And the resounding response was, we want a grocery store. We want to buy our food. We want to have the dignity of making those choices for our family. So we said, all right, we've got a 1,400 square foot metal building. We're going to make it into a grocery store, market, whatever you want to call it. And so we had that up and running a few months later. And then 5 months later, COVID happened. And lo and behold, food access got even more difficult if your only transportation is public transportation, and we're worried about spreading a virus, being around people. It just compounds the challenge of accessing food. And so, our little market could only do so much. So last summer there's a lot of people involved in this conversation of, how do we get a store here? And it's where we landed, and we're real excited about. We are partnering with Homeland to open the market at East Point that will be opening soon. It's a pretty cool partnership. Homeland, who obviously they are very skilled in the grocery business. We are not. Our market showed us that if we didn't know it beforehand. So they are going to be doing the operations. So they have their management in place, and then RestoreOKC as a nonprofit is owning it, hoping to bring some really neat partnerships in to make sure that the groceries are affordable to our community, as well as, within this year, we expect to see 20 to 30 more jobs in our community. The other cool piece, and, part of everything we do is connected, and the farms will be selling a lot of their produce and products in the grocery store. And we'll also have a restaurant, cafe, eatery that one of our employees, who is a very well-known chef on the East Side, she owned her own restaurant here. She is going to be running our cafe, which our interns are real excited about, learning how to turn, the food they're growing into food to eat.
Yeah, the hope there is some very incredible farm to table spends on some soul food that you're going to want to eat. So you're going to want to know where this address is. It's 1708 Northeast 23rd, which, if you're familiar with that 23rd Martin Luther King intersection, is just west of that barely. 23rd and Rhode Island, and a cool aspect of just even where this location landed, it's directly across from the east and west bus stops on 23rd, which is when the community, that transit piece is a huge stuck point. So we thought it was pretty incredible to get that located where it's super easy for neighbors to access and have a full blown grocer. It'll be, for sake of, kind of your knowledge, sort of the size of a Trader Joe's. So it's not a 40,000 square foot Sam's, but it's going to be a really wonderful answer to food access. So I think we probably ought to shut up, because that is a lot, and let you guys interact and ask any questions you may have. And if you don't have any, we can get into a little bit of just some of the fun partnerships that are actually coming with OU Health and this grocery store. So let's stop for a minute and see.
Yeah, that was a really incredible talk, and just being able to know what you guys are doing in your neighborhood and the area, and that you're really focused on what the people that live there want, instead of just saying, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to implement it, but you're asking them what they want and trying to help them implement it on their own. So it's just really great what you guys are doing. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to either put it in the chat, or you can open up your mic and ask them. Otherwise, I do have a few that were submitted beforehand.
I had a quick question. I was just wondering, first of all, thank you for sharing. This has been really interesting and awesome to hear about. I was just wondering how you guys are distributing the groceries or the produce that you're producing now. But I was just wondering how you guys distribute that and how you keep up with that. Is it volunteer-based? Do you have workers there? Just some details on
Do you want to volunteer on the farm, Krista? Is that what you're really getting at? It is more fun than whatever you do, I promise you, because it's when I get sick of writing grants or doing things, that's where I try to go play. Great question. Yeah, so most of the produce, if it's most everything we do, there's going to be some exceptions, right? There's not a revenue income generating potential for Restore Schools arm. That we can acknowledge that that's probably not a thing unless we want to start selling pencils. But you know, everything we do otherwise, we're hoping becomes really income generating and self-sustaining. And then again, invest those resources back into the tax base of the community so that our schools are better funded, so on and so forth. So most everything we're doing with regard to that produce is to try to sell it. So selling to local chef groups. Homeland is pretty much interested in buying whatever we can produce. So, you know, we're in a really interesting phase where we're actually trying to not only figure out our production in this first go round off these greenhouse towers, but we're actually also trying to find more land to scale production because there's more demand than we even really know what to do with. So that's a really encouraging and exciting problem. And yes, we use volunteers all the time. So you can go to restoreokc.org and we would gladly put you to work in the greenhouses if that is something that sounds fun to you.
We did have a question in the chat. What other ways can we volunteer with you guys?
I think I may know you too, that person. There's lots of ways to volunteer. Again, so go to restoreokc.org and you'll be able to see what all, you know, each of those little program arms has a breakout page so you can sort of see the scope of how I could volunteer in the schools. How can I volunteer on the farms? How could I volunteer? Homes has a work day every second Saturday of the month from 8:30 to 1. Usually
Unless it's 9 degrees outside.
Unless it's 9 degrees and we're in COVID. So we're bumping this month back so that we're not all suffering from hypothermia and no use hospitals. But there's some easy and great low-hanging fruit ways to get involved. And again, our hope is that not only is that a way to come and volunteer, it's a way to build a relationship in a community you may or may not have really logical, easy ways of being in relationship with. And our hope is that is as much about and volunteering and helping change a broken piece. It's also as much about helping us change and realize, hey, as communities, when we've landed in, you know, communities that have disparities, like we haven't done a good job of being caring for the whole city, of being good neighbors, however you want to, you know, look at that. So hopefully it goes both ways. Great question. My mic doesn't work, but I'd like to mention how cool it is that you're using aquaponics to provide fresh produce. Thank you. We think so too. It's a very fun system to come look at. So 2,000 fish, 72 towers. The aquaponic towers give us 60 to 80 times the production volume as if we were to grow horizontally. Now on this farm, it is a production farm, but it's run by our high school students. Julie mentioned, so when we began our first set of high school students, 15 out of 15 of them said they would drop out of high school because they didn't have a higher education future in mind, and they were already primary household income earners. So for us, it became, how do we use these greenhouses as a way to employ these students right now so they're making income for their families, but also partner with Langston, OSU, OU, and give them a trajectory for higher education in partnership with those universities. So some fun things coming from that. One of them being OU is going to actually help, hopefully, partner with this grocery store and license some of them as community health workers as high school students. So they'll be doing some of the dietitian work alongside shoppers in that store, which we are thrilled about. That'll be community next generation youth helping change trajectories for families in their own community. It's really fun. You didn't ask that question, but I gave you more information than you wanted. What else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed hearing some of your stories with some of your community members, because I think it painted a really good picture of what real time it looks like for you guys to be doing community work and some of the impacts that you're leaving on your community through relationships. But one of the buzzwords that stood out to me was you described it as incarnational. And I was curious to get a little bit more of your take on what that means to you and how that's been playing out in the work that you've been doing.
Oh, Brandon, how much time do we have left here, Kyle?
Until they kick us out, I guess.
Until they kick us out. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, so buzzwords. I like that you think I can use a buzzword, one that just makes me feel cool and like I haven't lost my touch. To incarnational, it's the difference between, right, looking at this, you can look at, and we frequently do this, you can look at, social determinants of health measures and health scores. You can look at the kinds of graphs that we showed you, and you can pretty well determine, right, what the needs are of the community that we sit in right now. We could determine that. And in fact, a lot of organizations have done just that, which is another reason sometimes and often why trust is really difficult in this community, especially, and our staff is not reflective of what you see right here. We're about half and half, but Julie and I were like the only folks available today. So, but I do think it really does help when you come into these communities, you don't come saying, hey, I kind of have already decided how you guys are all broken, and so we're just going to kind of fix you. Clearly you've got an education issue, we're going to dump some money, and like, oh, also there's this program that's worked in another state, we're going to just roll it out here and it's going to just like revolutionize your schools, right? It actually changes the nature when you move into the community. And now this isn't just, and this was true for us in St. Louis, now it's my problem. Now it actually is my problem. So I do care about it differently, because you know what, it doesn't just affect those kids, it affects my kids. Doesn't just affect those people, it affects me, where I go to buy groceries, and I have a car, praise the Lord, but when I need milk, I'm annoyed. I'm just going to tell you. So for us, that is a very pivotal piece of, and keeps us, we would say, in everything that we do, we want to engage with humility. Humility is very practical. It's not just like when Julie gives me a compliment and I shrug it off, right? It's actually saying I'm willing to engage in a way that I don't have to, maybe, and suffer alongside you, because we actually truly are better together. And my good is actually wrapped up in understanding and hearing the hearts and understanding the stories and what shaped my community members that I have not had the opportunity to do because of, maybe where I was raised. So it's just that doing life on life together, rather than trying to necessarily roll out a program that fixes a problem. That's how I would succinctly say that, Brandon. Great question. Could do a whole other breakout session.
Can I do a follow-up question as well?
Okay, gosh.
I really appreciate and identify that perspective. So I'm always curious when I come across people that practice asset-based community development. And I was curious how you're posturing within that incarnational approach has informed how you do ABCD within community, and has that produced fruit that you've just been really impressed with, or what does it look like in real time?
Again, you're asking 100,000 questions, man. How's it? I'm going to try to break that down. Unless you do want to take a stab at it, I'm chatty. You're doing great. She's going to throw me under the bus. That's what that is. How's it produced fruit that we're proud of? So I will use an example just to sort of protect dignity of neighbors here, but so one of my dearest friends in the world still is one of the women who walked off the streets from prostitution and addiction in St. Louis. And I will tell you this, that as soon as she, and that was a 7-year-long process. So just that was not like some miraculous sudden intervention. There were hilarious moments in ERs and rehabs involved, but just walking together through that, and as friends, learning how to engage as friends, like, hey, I care about you, you're making me crazy. When she truly broke through and was clean, do you want to know how many folks she brought into that rehab space to get wraparound care and off those streets in the first year? It was like 80. You want to know how many people I did in my full first 7 years? It's like 4. That's maddening, but it's incredible in terms of recognizing that as you think about asset-based community development and the fruit of the work that you're really striving for, it's not that Julie and I are going to necessarily be able to be the kind of leaders that can just go, engage in a community in a significant way, but we do have a piece that we play. right? And it's a significant one. And then you can give that away to leaders who have the ability to engage in ways you don't, and you can resource and fan that into flames. And we're really, there's 100 stories for that one that we've seen in the last 5 years here. But that's a really great example.
Thank you. That was a beautiful story.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions if anyone has a question.
Sure. I'll follow up Brandon's really high level, tough questions. Well, and first of all, thank you so much for what you're talking about and all of the work you're doing. Anyway, so I'll follow up with a pretty straightforward question. What's your staff look like? I mean, you're doing a lot. How many of you are there?
Too many now. I've like lost count.
I'll
I'm just kidding. She's
I'll
the
answer
numbers.
this one. So we have 17 staff that are either in director or manager level positions. So we have the 4 program arms that I kind of walked through. They each have a director and then some manager teams. We have a leadership team of 3, and then in our job training program, we have 25 employees who are in Wellspring Cleaning Company, and we have 12 middle school and high school interns with the farm. So what's that equal?
And we're in the process of hiring 30 for the grocery store. So you're smarter than we are. Add those all together, and there's your answer, Ryan. It's a lot. And what's incredible is we have so quickly tipped the scales in terms of being able to hire 30 neighbors is such an incredible, and not only in terms of being able to give them a job, which has been so needed, but also in informing and becoming part of our team, which just changes the nature of how we continue to see things and grow as leaders as well. So we now have 30 truly, community level folks at the heart of everything we're doing. That has been just a really incredible process to see happen too.
Yeah, that's super cool. And that's really nimble of you all to do so much with relatively few people. That's awesome.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like a lot, and sometimes it feels like what we need like 50 more people. It's a good way to think about that. It's where volunteers are also incredibly helpful. Quick plug.
I'm sure after this conference, you guys will probably get a few more volunteers signing up for you guys.
Awesome.
And I highly recommend everyone to go actually check out their website. It's really beautifully put together. And it's really cool just to look at the different stories of all that they're doing up in Northeast OKC. And this is coming to the close of the conference, I guess. It's 3:30, and we know you guys have lots of things to get done this afternoon. So just thank you so much, Caylee and Julie, for your time and being here. It's just hearing about what you guys are doing and sharing with us on how we can also do better in our community and also volunteer with you guys. And the aquaponics, I mean, it's pretty great.
The real highlight here, sure. Thank you guys for letting us be a part.
Yes.
It's an honor.
So I think that's probably the end. So I think you guys can just leave the conference session. I don't think you have to go back to the main page.
Okay.
But thank you guys so much. And we look forward to seeing what comes up, what you guys do next and keep doing.
Us too. Thanks, Kyle.
All right. Thank you guys.
Bye.
And OU Med students, if you're still on, don't forget to do that outreach poll. I think Alice posted the link to that.
Who do we put as our Alcha contact?
Alice, do you know?
Go ahead and put Jan beyond. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys, and thanks for coming.
Great job today, everyone.